Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 145 of Two Amazon Sellers and a Microphone, brought to you by Solozo. And today, Chris, we're excited. We got a big name in the Amazon space here joining us, and we're excited to hear all about his journey. But Eytan Wiener, you're here with us today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. I don't know how big my name is, but I appreciate it. I'm very excited to talk with you guys.
You've been all over our social media feeds recently because you've been attending and hosting all kinds of events everywhere. I know you got to be worn out.
Yeah, a little tired today. We had a bunch of events this week in different cities. So that's fun getting back to events. I really enjoy the personal networking, but definitely takes a toll. Yeah. But this hopefully this will pick me up a little. And I like to talk as you'll learn.
Yeah, well, so do we. And Chris and I are kicking ourselves for missing out on some of these events. It's just been for one reason or the other where it just didn't work out logistically. But I mean, just looking at what you guys did, the communities and all the people that we've talked to on this podcast are all there. Look, just good time and great networking. And that's what those events are for. I mean,
it's funny. Like obviously, Yoni, you've spoken to Yoni, my partner. A bunch of times, and he's actually in like one of the rooms next door here. And I overhear, and I always hear you guys have a good time. But my point was that Yoni, I guess, in the beginning of the pandemic, he kind of hunkered down. I was working in the office here, which I'll maybe get to later as far as my story. And he just started building, podcasts and networks and interviews. And then when we went to Prosper, which we'll get to, like all these people came over. And he has a certain style of interviewing where he asks people their background and whatnot, which is nice. But like, he's a very good memory too. So everyone knew who he was, and they knew who and he knew who they were, but they had never met. Like, you probably never met him in person. Hopefully, I'll meet you too, in person. So to go from like the virtual to like meeting someone's like, it's interesting, but it's like you really know them, and it's very like delightful in its own way, kind of amazing actually. So hopefully, we'll meet in person.
For sure.
And there's a bunch of other events coming up, so you still have the opportunity.
We'll be attending a lot coming up.
Okay, great.
And he's amazing. So both Chris and I went on his podcast, and so he's going through our story. And I mean, I'm talking to him for like 45 minutes, and then he rattles off point by point my entire life that I just told him. And I was like, "Did you take notes?" And he's like, "No." I'm like,
"Yeah, it's good.
That's incredible." That's a skill. I mean, he knew every single thing that I had said in the last 45 minutes, which was
he's a good listener, and he packages it well. But it's fun. I'm getting into this. I guess I have my own background, which we'll talk about, but like this little podcasting / interview circuit. Different personality, but we work closely, so I'm really happy to be here.
And Robbie Stanley's a part of your team now too.
Robbie has his own methods and style, but Robbie's part of the team. He's awesome.
Love the outfits he's sporting.
He's all about Mr. Money.
Mr. Money.
Yeah, he came with the money suits and money shirts, and he really enjoys this paraphernalia. It's like he's like a kid in a candy store with all the swag. I love it, and it's great because we get recognition and we get real conversations, even though it's fun as well. So he's been adding a lot of value on the marketing side. We're really happy to have him. And I think he was the one who set this up, so I appreciate it.
That's awesome. Well, we cannot wait to see you guys all in person at some point. But let's now dive into your story. You have a really interesting story, and we don't know, Chris and I don't know all of it yet, but we know you started as selling on Amazon, and man, and I'm sure you did a lot before that too, but that's really evolved. You've done a lot of interesting things since then. So you've got the floor. We'd love to hear just sort of your story of how you got into this space, and then like what you're doing now, and talk about GETIDA and how it helps sellers right now.
Sure. Yeah, I'll try to do the I don't know, 4 or 5 minute version because it could be much longer, but that's probably appropriate for the time. I guess just kind of briefly, I started in e-commerce in like 2008. I worked for digital. I actually was in dental school, didn't like it, dropped out. That's the beginning of the story. And I went into digital marketing and SEO and PPC. when it was kind of starting out in 2008 or 9. And then I worked with a client who I started working with more full time as like a B2B slash wireless solution service, where we were selling systems and infrastructure online. It's like an SEO based model. So people would search for products and find our solutions. We would sell it, because as the old like distributor model was kind of going away, where you call up somebody, people were just Googling part numbers. So we would come up for the part numbers, then we would figure out the solution. Kind of complex, but it worked. And it was a cool, great business, but it was a very slow sales cycle, right? Like government deals and contracts and like very big companies. So I learned a lot about training and systems and process. But the way that kind of got into e-commerce quickly was we started to sell some like the end user devices, right? So instead of like a cell tower, we would sell, let's say, a cell repeater or something for your home to give you coverage, or like a hotspot. Before that was like a popular thing. Now it's very popular or ubiquitous. And most of these companies were like guys in their basements and like somewhere in the middle of nowhere that had a great product and solution, but didn't know how to go online. Right now it's very different. This is only like 11 years ago, but it's very, very different. So just using the best practices that I learned or knew, and my partners as well, we started listing some of the products on eBay, and then we're like really flying. And then I built a Magento website, on my own, and with my partner's help, and we started listing these products and doing Google ads. It's just best practice SEO and organic and paid, and we became like not to say necessarily the biggest, but let's say the fastest growing resellers of these brands, because we're really doing it right. Before there was any real, I guess, competition, there was some. Mm-hmm. And that was cool. We went from a few 100,000 to a few million in sales just on the web direct, and we had 20 or 30 kind of brands that we were doing that for. And then we found Amazon. That was like in 2010 or 11. Started off $4,000 or $5,000 in sales a month in April 2011, and by December we were doing like 450,000 a month.
Jeez.
And this is when like FBA was beginning, and when it was very easy. It was the Wild West in a good and bad way. Mm-hmm. So we were selling the products that we had good pricing and presence on, with little competition. But once you hit Amazon, as you know, it's different now, but once you hit Amazon, it's like addictive and explosive. So especially then, when there wasn't so much competition, you could kind of sell anything. Mm-hmm. So we got a little scattered and started selling. We stuck to like telecom products, but we did some other arbitrage. We did private label. We did refurbishing. We did Europe. We did everything and anything, every model, any model. So it got a little scattered. I get a lot of revenue. I definitely didn't make a lot of money for many years, because we were just experimenting, honestly. And we, as you know, many sellers don't know how much money they're making till today. And even then, we didn't really know. And now I know that we didn't really make money, but we learned, which is really more valuable sometimes. Obviously, you have to pay the bills as well. Mm-hmm. Anywho, it got to almost 30 or 40 million, and we that was great, but again, it wasn't as lucrative. And once I dug in and thought about it, my partner John and I decided to kind of pivot the model, and he really led the initiative to change the strategy, in that we would focus on higher margin, more unique strategies than just selling everything and anything like a flea market. And we did. So all the exclusive brands we kept, because there was higher margin, and we were doing the ads and everything for them. And we'd make a hard market. It was still a buy sell. It wasn't an agency, but we were like the only sellers for 20 or 30 of these brands. We did a really good job. And then all the other tech stuff that we sold, like the more maybe brand name, like mics or headsets or whatever, that were a little more upstream, we couldn't be exclusives because they were giants and didn't really want that. Mm-hmm. So John and the team created this model based on some of our private label experience and know-how to do a bundling model. So we had this brand called Blue Coil, BLUCOIL, bluecoil.com. And for example, this is a podcast. This is a good example. Now that became a big thing. So you guys have these podcasting mics. Mm-hmm. I have a headset. It's very important. So when you buy a podcasting mic, as you know, it's not just that. You actually need a filter and a holder and a software. And now it's more common. But when we started doing it, no one really knew how to use it. And that was the value of brick and mortar. Sometimes we actually have a sales guy who helps you. So as great as Amazon is, the Amazon product page is quite obscure and really busy. which is a separate discussion. And the cross sells and the suggestions of what to sell are okay, but they're not great. So we basically created that as a bundle solution. So I'll make a listing with a Sennheiser headphone, a microphone, and a boom arm and a filter and all that we would source from China based on our experience at sourcing, and sell that as a value solution. Maybe it's the same price, maybe it's $10 more, but it's our own dedicated page. And you can look online, there's many of them, there's thousands of them, with all different variations. And that gives you exclusivity in a way, but it's done in a way with the brand's approval. It's not like shady or illicit. It's all like, hey, the brand thinks we're adding value because we are. We read reviews and see what people want, and we create it. And it adds more value to the brand, it adds more value to the client because they're getting everything they need, which leads to more sales and hopefully more higher margin sales. So we pivoted to the point where like 60+% of the business was from that model. And then we had the exclusives, and then we had some of this buy, sell, other stuff that was like, why not? Because it was easy. So because of that pivot, we increased the margin a lot to the point where the company was, I guess, more valuable and significant than just another reseller dude. And based on that, I mean, long story short, we sold the company to a company called Advantage Solutions, which is a public consumer product company that wanted more of an online presence. They were more like into physical brick and mortar at the end of 2019. And that sounds normal now because everyone sells Amazon brands. But when I did it, it was very, not to toot my own horn at all, but it was very rare. So agencies were a little more sexy because they had rev share. And when I tried to sell, most acquirers wanted like an agency. They didn't want to touch inventory. And then, like 9 or 10 months later, there's like, 500 aggregators that are buying inventory for crazy numbers. So I don't know how my timing was or was not, but it's just so interesting to see how that changed so fast. And, it is what it is. And then just briefly, the Prosper Show, which many, people probably know about or I've attended. That was something that I started with James Thompson, who was my rep at Amazon back in the day, executive at Amazon, who was helping me grow. And we built that to a really nice show that we had in August, but we sold it at the end of 2018. So there was never really, we talk about all these events, right? You just spoke about the events. There was never really an event or a show. There was like some very, very few shows. Most of them were like software companies that had a show and were very biased, like blah, 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 use our software. So we're like, let's get really good value, content, education, and then, maybe the money will follow and people will come. And long story short, that's what happened, but I had to beg people to come, and we had 30 vendors the first year in Salt Lake in 2016 that paid like a few $1,000s, and it was like pulling teeth, and like, maybe 400 sellers. And last month at Prosper, there was probably like 2,300 people, sellers, investors, marketers, press, and like 120 booths. So you could see that growth. Obviously, it was a lot of execution on our team's part, but also the growth of the industry. And this year, obviously, we don't run it anymore. We help or consult a bit, but it was a different level with all the aggregators and the post-COVID money into e-commerce and the 10-year growth in a period of 3 whatever months. The show was just like at a different level. I was so, I guess, flattered or maybe remorseful that we don't run it anymore. But that's my story. Just to finish with GETIDA. So just briefly, because I know it's been long.
Great.
I really briefly, I created a reimbursement tool in-house in like 2010 because I noticed a lot of loss on Amazon with inventory and transit and all that stuff. Maybe it's a few percentage points, but it really adds up. It wasn't great, and it never kind of did enough of what I wanted to. And someone kind of tried to build a software out of it, which is a different story. And then I did it in-house. I went to some of these other providers, and long story short, I met Yoni and Max, my partner, at Prosper in 2018 when they kind of came to market. They were doing it in-house before. They kind of went big to market. They found the same need where sellers wanted a tool or needed a tool to help with lost funds, which we'll get to. As you know, most sellers don't even know that it's a problem. So it's an easy sell when you're offering them free money, and it's kind of actually sophisticated. So they did a great job for me, so much so that when I sold, I think just reimbursements specifically, since I was a lower margin business, just the reimbursements that went straight to the bottom line were almost 16% of my profit. So
Jeez.
that times a multiple is a lot of money, and it's like, wow, this is really impactful. So I started referring them a bunch of clients, and that looked good for me and the clients and them, and I got more involved. And then I started working with Yoni in the office. Maybe when you started to work with Yoni, just kind of behind the scenes, seeing if I can get involved, because I had to work for this. I worked for this corporation for a year in 2020, and as I transitioned, and then in the beginning of this year, I invested, and I'm the CEO now of GETIDA, trying to help sellers and grow the business, which has been going really great, and it's very fun. It's very exciting. It's a few minutes from my house, which is also great. So that's Eytan in maybe 7 minutes.
See, that's why it's hard to name this podcast. There's so much in there. I was like, I don't know what to name it. And he's done everything. Like the wholesaling, it's pretty cool. Like that back in the day was probably a bit different than it is now. But like getting these brands, selling their product, and then you pivoted and did the whole private label, like where you just bundled a product. Like that. We talked to a couple wholesalers a few episodes back, and I'm like, they didn't even think of that. Like, that's what I was telling them. You guys have an advantage. Like, you already sell the products. You already know what's selling. Like, just go take a bundle and make your own listing. And I'm like, oh yeah, like we could do that. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, it's easier. It's easier said than done, because you have to understand the sourcing component and the supply chain of multiple products. But yeah, if you could do it, it's a really big white space, because you have that angle. It's sophisticated. It's detailed, but it works. Yeah.
And then the Prosper, I went to the first one, the second one in Vegas.
Yeah.
The first year in Vegas, I went to that one.
Yeah.
And you're right. At the time, there really wasn't like a conference. It was, Tool put it on or whatever, but there really wasn't like a big, everybody get together. And I remember hearing like, got to go to Vegas for Prosper. I'm like, all right, I'll check it out.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. It was amazing there.
Yeah. You went to like the sessions or the vendors or both?
I went to all of it.
I
was a seller. This was before Saloza. I'm still a seller, but I went to all the sessions. I went around the booths.
Nice. Yeah.
It was a good time. It was good just to get around some people.
Yeah.
And people you listen to on podcasts, they were there, and it was just
not only and just to add to that, and I say this on a bunch of these podcasts, but not just was it so big this year, but you saw like the manifestation, I guess, of all these other groups. So all the podcasts and all the masterminds and all the $1 million groups and all the Facebook groups. I don't know. We sponsored a bunch of events, like 4 or 5 events, which is great, because there's only so much you could do on the show floor, and then there's the fun and there's the personal interaction. But my point is, like, when we started Prosper again, it was like this small thing, barely got it together, and now it's an event that has like 4 tailgate parties and 20 after parties, and it's like the Grammys, or like, I mean, obviously not that, but it's intense, and a lot of people just went to go to the parties and the events. They didn't even go to the show. It was I was like so overwhelmed by the magnitude, to be honest, and it was just like really amazing, really special.
I think that hits on a big aspect of this industry as a whole. I mean, well, number one, your story. I think it's fascinating. If you would have been told, or if somebody would have told you when you were selling stuff on eBay, however many years ago, oh, this is the journey that this is going to lead to, you might have been like, that sounds crazy, a little far-fetched and crazy that you would end up, starting a huge conference show, and then with what you're doing with GETIDA now, selling your business, all the things that happen. I think, but my point to Prosper is that a part of this community is this is a unique business where people are willing to share. They want to talk. They want to know what's going on. Even competitors. I mean, essentially, we're all in some ways competitors if we're selling on Amazon, if we're in the same niche, or whatever, but they all want to help each other out. And for me, and Chris and I talk about this all the time, when we started, that was a huge stumbling block for us. Is there not maybe there was opportunities that we didn't know about, but we just were not networking. And so you're kind of on this island of trying to figure out this behemoth, and it was the Wild West. But now that we are more networking, I mean, it's just so much more fun to be a part of this business. You learn faster. You learn as a group. Who. I just think that that's a huge part and a huge takeaway for anybody who's listening is, if you're getting started in this business, networking is huge, and attending all that.
Yeah, it's very true. And it actually just reminds me of something. I was at this other event in Brooklyn, and talking to some seller, and I was like, "What do you do?" Or like, "What's your business?" He's like, "Oh, I don't give that information out." And it took me back, and I respect, like, that's okay, but I mean, I don't agree with that, methodology. I'll explain why. But it took me back to like the first Prosper, where people were afraid to say what they did because some guy was going to steal their idea. It was a very paranoid, price-driven, surreal, like, business where like you couldn't tell anyone what you sold because they would copy you. And I was like, seriously, like you're not going to tell me what you do? I was like, I mean, he's entitled to his opinion, but there are still wholesalers or guys like that who do things, whether it's legitimately or have multiple accounts and whatever black hat. Like I don't like, that's fine. Like, it's a free world. You could do what you want. But I was like, but to your point, yeah, it used to be people were very quiet, secretive on one hand, but also to your point, there wasn't a medium like Prosper or podcasts or Facebook or any of these things where people could collaborate. And now, yeah, it is fun because it's so collaborative. But I'll just tell you this, we're doing well. We have a lot of clients and a lot of sellers who know, so to speak, who are in the game. They'll hear about us or about Solozo because they're on Facebook or they're on WhatsApp groups or they're in networks. But that's like really maybe a few % of all sellers, because as you know, there's 3 to 5 million sellers, maybe 1.8 million active, and maybe like 40,000 that do over $1 million a year. The large majority of like 90% are just dudes that are in their basement, or they're in China, or they're in Australia somewhere, and they have no clue what we know. So as big as this is and as fun as it is, like, I feel like on the GETIDA standpoint, educating people about reimbursements and data, and I'm sure you guys also for ads, there's people struggling that don't need to because they're stuck somewhere, and the internet allows them to collaborate. And as opposed to what I mentioned before, where people were like paranoid or afraid, it's not that. It's either like naivete or ignorance or both. Where like, if you just Google a bit, like, you can get in the game. You could become quite educated with hard work, and it's so amazing, and it's so different than it was very few years ago. It's like night and day. But still, I think it's our responsibility to help everyone else who's trying to get started, and to not deceive. Like, there's a lot of these groups like, hey, make $1 million overnight. I hate that. There's no shortcuts. There's no get rich quick. Like, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of failure. I failed a lot. I'm telling you about some of the successes, but for all those out there, like, it doesn't. Every day is a grind. And to your point, like, did I think I would be where I was when I started? No. But the harder you work, the luckier you get, so to speak. Like, you need to persevere and deal with all these trials, and a lot of these groups and masterminds make like, oh, it's so easy, nothing bad happens, like, you never get suspended and life's great. It's really not like that. It's very hard, but it could also be rewarding at the same time.
Oh yeah, talking about failures, I think, is helpful, and that's another thing that's unique about this space is people are willing to say that. I mean, like, look, I launched my own Amazon business, got to the point where I was able to quit my job, and then like 2 years later, I needed to supplement income again because some things happen. Yep. But to your point about millions of dollars, you talked about your wholesale, how you were throwing out numbers that sound huge, but at the same time, you were talking about how you weren't making that much money. I think people, you see that nonsense, all the time. The Lambo photos on Facebook, and you're like, it's it's
yeah, crazy. That's another story. But yeah, like, I could run a business now doing I don't know how much 100 millions and lose money. Like, it's very easy to lose money and sell a lot of stuff at a loss because the volume is there if you price in a non-transparent or understood way. I think that has gotten a lot better because there's a lot of great tools like yours, like Solozo, and like profit dashboards that are not fully there, but they're pretty much better than anything that ever existed back in the day when it was really spreadsheets and no one knew what was going on. Even the most sophisticated high-end sellers they knew they were making money, but they didn't know, item level detail, profit level detail. This is before ads. Just basic cost of goods plus Amazon fees and tying it to the bank was like the hardest thing ever to do. Now there's many solutions for it. There's almost too many. But that's good. That's a good thing, I think.
Oh, I think so for sure. And now to touch on reimbursements, and you were talking about how, it was interesting that you brought up all these people that we think are listening to it. It's such a listening to this content and networking stuff. It's such a small percentage of Amazon sellers. You're dead right about that. I was absolutely one of those back in the day that was just living on my own island. But to get to the point where somebody told me, I don't know, it was many, many years ago, that about reimbursements, that Amazon had money that I was owed and I had no idea about it. And I can't remember what I used at the time. I don't even know. I don't even know what I used to figure out what I was
manual.
owed.
What you had to do is you had to do like five per case. Like you just did like five orders per case, and you just like constantly.
That's exactly
over and over.
Exactly what I did. But I'll never forget that I got like $2,700 or something on the first one, or it was maybe $3,700. I was like, I can't believe this. I cannot believe I had this sitting on the table, didn't know about it. Amazon owed me this money. It was unbelievable. I mean, I could have gone for years without ever knowing that if someone hadn't told me. And it's a really unique space inside Amazon is this reimbursement. So we'd love to touch on that a little bit more about GETIDA, because we Yoni came on and did a great job explaining about how you guys do. You have a real unique where you're using software plus you've got this humans looking at it as well, which is critical. But just touch on how, like, the people that come on to you, the impact, you mentioned it, 17% or whatever of your profit was from reimbursements. Just touch on that reimbursement part now, that from GETIDA.
Yeah. So I kind of gave you the story and how I got into it and why I was passionate about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was one of the first to create the awareness / model or software for it. So it's interesting because everyone's like, oh, like, doesn't like Amazon hate you? Like you're so bad, you're stealing their money. But the answer is no. On the contrary, you have to do things correct. And there's actually issues now in an industry where people open too many cases, or their software is not good, or it's outsourced and it's very sloppy. And we're very tight in how we do it. And I'm sure you want to explain there where there's a whole team of there's a software that finds the problems. That's an algorithm that's been honed over 6+ years. And we have 20+ people here and almost 60 globally, but most of the people in New York or New Jersey are developers and software people, because this is not light. This is not just a couple of spreadsheets. This is not macros. This is not manual. It's a combination of a lot of things. So we have sellers that are doing 3 figures and sellers that are doing 9 figures. But the beauty is of software that we can handle both. We could pull in reports from both. We could work with aggregators. We could work with whoever. But you need to invest in the scale, right? So we're in the Amazon App Store. We're doing it in a legitimate, sophisticated way where Amazon does not hate us. They hate when people do things wrong. They hate when people submit bad data and waste their case manager's time. But to your point, no one knows Amazon. 60+%, I would say, of sellers don't even know that this is a problem, and then or that you could even tell Amazon they're wrong, or how to. Or that we exist. So we're actually doing quite well, but we only have a small percentage of the market, which is, it's great that we're doing well, but it's also crazy how open the space is. And again, certain people do it in-house, which is fine. You should, as Yoni often says, but let us come and let us help, let us add. It's not mutually exclusive, because if we're dealing with data from tens of thousands of sellers and billions of transactions, we're inherently able to see things that you probably would not. Not that you're doing anything wrong, just you don't have the time of the day, number one, or the data or the experience. And then once we find something on, Dustin's account that's legit, or that you bring something up to us, we can actually apply it across everybody. So that's the community effect.
Mm-hmm.
So on the other hand, or what I was saying before, is that Amazon's pretty good. I mean, if they're 98% accurate on like billions of units, like that's pretty freaking good. 99, whatever, 97, 98%. But that 1 to 2%, as you know, whether it's 3,000 or 30, or some sellers would get back $1 million a year, that's a lot of money. Just like there's loss in any business and audits in every physical goods. The goods get lost on the way to Amazon, within the warehouse, transit of warehouses, removals. It's just inevitable. They're still amazing, but that just happens. So it behooves sellers to know what's going on, to understand. And we add value by doing that, and you don't really have to do anything. You have to connect your account, you have to give us permissions, and we go to work for you. We only charge a success fee of what we gain. If we don't get anything, we don't charge you anything. There's no long-term agreements, and there's no catch to it. As Yoni says, it's free to try, free to stay. And the point is to add value and to add money to the bottom line. Just one more thing, you know, Amazon has a lending product, right, where they offer you money. Hey, you know, like here's, and I've used it in the past as well. But if you think about it, they're not doing it for the interest, right? They're not a bank. They're not, oh, we make 4 or 5%. They want you to grow, because when you grow, you make more sales. When you make more sales, they make the 15, 18% on every sale.
Right.
Right. So the point is that I'm making is that if I can help sellers like you guys or whoever, your clients, make more money, they're going to reinvest into Amazon. So Amazon wants sellers to make as much money they can, because if not, they're not going to continue. So the whole flywheel and cycle, whether it's lending or reimbursements and data or visibility on ads, is to help grow, not to stymie them and mislead them. So that's kind of my philosophy about it, and therefore I think it's a no-brainer, and it's very satisfying to help sellers, you know, get money. Like it's a very easy sell. Like, hey, would you like free money?
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to explain how it works, or they don't get it, or they're worried about the security of the process. But once I do, they're quite pleased, and they usually don't leave because there's no reason to.
Yeah.
So that's my philosophy. There we go. Yeah. You have a happy user, hopefully.
I'll tell you, when I first signed up, it was like super easy. Got in there, and like within a few days, I had a couple grand back that I either missed in the past or was missed, you know, manually or whatever. But you're right. Like I'm never gonna get rid of this tool. It's just something that's just in my account.
Yeah,
it's a peace of mind that I have. That okay, this is getting checked. You guys are running in the background. If something pops up, great. But what I really like about it is I can it's not one or the other. Like I don't have to get rid of a VA or use you. Like you guys can work together. Like, hey, we're also doing this, and we also have a VA doing that. Like it's a combination, and you're just either you're finding it before they do, or you're getting the scraps they missed. Either one works out.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Well, and thank you. It's not mutually exclusive. So I always tell sellers, you could do your own thing, do your own process. It's sometimes important to delineate time. Like you want to, do this for 90 days, and then we can clean up whatever. A lot of people think they have inbound down very tight, and as you know, inbound is very problematic for many levels with documents and support. So I had a client like, okay, do everything for us, but don't do inbound, because like we got it, we're great. I'm like, okay, like we are customizable. We don't have to. We're able to customize many things. But I said, you know what? And he was a very big seller. I was like, let me just do an audit. Let me see what's there. And there was like 70, 80 grand that he did not know about on inbound and I know why. It was very complicated. And we were able to get it back for him quickly. So it's almost like an upsell within our client base. Like, how come you're blocking us from this? We don't need to be the first in line. We're not here to do a money grab. But if you miss it, we'll work and continue to fight to get it. And if we can, great. If we can't, at least you tried. And that should be the mindset. And it's very, I think, rewarding.
Yeah, I mean, everybody who's listening should absolutely try to. I mean, you got to be one of the only services in the entire Amazon space where you only get charged for what you actually perform on. It's like you only get if you recover a certain amount of money, then you get a percentage of that. But that's it. I mean, what a win for every client that you have in that model. I think that it's a no-brainer for anybody.
It's interesting, like you're in the ad space, you have a fixed price model, which is great. There's some that do a percentage of spend, and there's some multi-channel platforms, let's say like Channel Advisor, whatever, that take a percentage of sales, and maybe they deserve it, so to speak, because they're providing the service and it's part of your infrastructure. But we're not taking a percentage of any sales,
right?
We're just taking a gain share. So whatever I additively gain you, I'll take from just to cover my cost or service. I'm not cutting into your margins. And to your point, on the contrary, I'm adding to your margins. So that's the beauty. But it's not everyone gets it. That's why it's a no-brainer. So there's many who are skeptical, like, oh, I want to do it on my own. Like, no, or I don't trust the data and all that. I mean, I get that on the trust, and we could talk about security and processes and sophistication, which we're investing in and enhancing. But again, do the best you can. Let us add value. No reason not to try, and not to stay. But that's kind of how I see it. And it's like a mission to educate the sellers, and whether it's the ones like you said who are in the community or not. how do I reach those who are not? Because where are they, and why don't they know about it? So that's what we're trying to do.
You know, we got to get you back on sometime in the future, because we'd love to do an episode where we just, go through all of the reasons why Amazon would owe you money. There's got to be hundreds of different scenarios where a reimbursement is in order that you wouldn't even think of. And like you're talking about the advancement that you guys are that you're making now, it'd be fun to get on and just go through all of that sometime in the future. So we may love to schedule that for sure.
Yeah, we could do like a walkthrough. We have a dashboard. Where you could see all the reimbursements, and you could upload your pick and pack fees and a bunch of other things. But also, that kind of just shows you what we're doing in the back end. I could explain if you want another time, or Yoni or whoever. Like, what are if someone wants to know, what are the reimbursements and what are other opportunities, or what we're looking at and how it works and why you may have missed it, or why Amazon can't actually account for it. If you want to go deep, that's fine. It's helpful. I'm happy to do that.
Oh yeah, I think that'd be a really fun episode to talk about that, just because a lot of people don't realize how many ways that Amazon could owe you money, and so we'll do that. We'll love to get you back on for sure. Before we go, because your story is amazing. I think everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, just hearing your story and what you're doing is so cool. So we appreciate you sharing that with us. But before we go, anybody out there who's listening, if they want to start using GETIDA right now or try it out, tell them what they do. What do they need to do?
Just go to GETIDA.com. There's a sign up button. I don't know if Yoni had given you guys like an affiliate code in the past that they could put in for a promotion. So. If so, you could type in Solozo for the code. I'll make sure anyone who's listening gets $400 free in reimbursements.
Wow!
So
there you go.
It's the first $400 free, whether you stay, whether not. It's just I'm giving you $400. We're giving you $400. Please accept our offer and try it. How about that? Just write Solozo in the coupon, and it's on the house.
No-brainer.
It's very simple. Yeah, and if anyone has questions, they can reach out to me. It's Eytan, EYTN, at GETIDA.com, and reach out to Yoni as well, or ask these guys for my info. I'm happy to help, and I really appreciate it. And yeah.
All right. I encourage everybody to do that. There's $400 sitting on the table right now. Just go to GETIDA and sign up. Use that code Solozo, like you mentioned. Eytan, thanks so much for coming on. Like I said, we'll get you back on. We'll do a deep dive into all the different ways that reimbursements can happen. Everybody who's listening, if you like content like this, if you like hearing really cool people like Eytan, hearing their stories, hearing all the cool things that are happening in the Amazon space, make sure you subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you're listening to us on. Also, we're live streaming to Solozo's Facebook page, LinkedIn page, and YouTube channel. So you could subscribe to those as well. Make sure you turn on notifications to get notified when we go live. So yeah, make sure that you do that. Also, if you're struggling with your advertising right now, if you're looking for a more automated solution, we'd love to help you. That's what Solozo's here for. You can go to Solozo.com right now. You can book a demo with Chris or myself. We'll talk about anything. We can look at your campaigns with you. We'll talk about your listings. Are they converting well? We'll talk about anything Amazon, and we'll also show you how Solozo can help you out. So make sure you go to Solozo.com and book that. We'll get you set up with a 14-day free trial. So make sure you do that. Everyone, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Have a good day.